They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. That is the exhortation that is being heard this morning at literally thousands of services that are taking place right across this country. And of course the central act is the one taking place at the Cenotaph, where the Queen today, aged 91, is not laying a wreath but watching on from a balcony, and Prince Charles in fact laid the first wreath on behalf of the nation. It is the Royal British Legion, of course, that are in charge of organising that ceremony. And earlier this morning I spoke to Bob Gamble, OBE, who is the commemorative events lead for the British Legion, and I began by asking him how the Legion started.
The Royal British Legion's formation was, in essence, a product of so many people at the end of the First World War came back, soldiers, unemployed, poor, injured, families that had gone through fairly tough times, as you can imagine. Soldiers' widows on peanut wage, on peanut pensions, and an organisation built around communities that looked after them, and they all amalgamated by 1921 into the Royal British Legion as we know it today.
And I remember when I was young that in the middle of the poppy it used to say the Hague Fund. So Douglas Haig, who many in revisionist history have been taught about in a very negative way, but isn't it true to say he played quite a positive role in the early days of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, interestingly, he, of course, was the commander of the British forces on the Western Front, held in great regard by the British forces. I think in the sort of 60s and 70s, in the times of, oh, what a lovely war, all of the sort of generals took a bit of a hammer in that kind of clever after the fact way. But certainly, it's true to say that when General Haig died, I think it was only when Princess Diana died that there were more people who attended the funeral than his. So he was a galvanizing force, he and his wife, in terms of welfare for troops at the end of the war.
Yes, and of course, with the big parade marching past the Cenotaph today, of course, his statue is there in Whitehall. It's a very important piece of history for us to remember. So tell us, Bob, and we've seen 100-year-old poppy sellers in South Wales, and you can't move in the country without seeing poppy sellers, I'm pleased to say. But how much money are you hoping to raise this year?
The target we set ourselves for the poppy appeal is £47 million, which is, a huge amount of money, and we raise it because we have over 400,000 poppy sellers, volunteers that go out on our behalf, and all of that poppy appeal money is then used for looking after those who have served, those are serving, and their families, and it's hugely gratifying that year on year we just seem to continue to be amazed at the generosity and the warmth that the British people have, and the volunteers that go out on our behalf to help raise money through the poppy appeal. It's quite a humbling experience as an ex-soldier to see all of this going on year on year.
And those people listening who perhaps haven't yet dipped their hands in their pockets, tell them where their money's going to go. What typically would you be spending the money on?
Well, almost from the very young to the oldest, in some way or another touched by the poppy appeal and the money that's spent by the Royal British Legion for the service community, for those transitioning out. We clearly run a number of programs through the Battleback Centre for those suffering from rehabilitation issues through injury. We run dementia homes, care homes, whatever is needed in order to meet a requirement to look after those that have served or the serving and their families.
And tell me, in terms of events, obviously the Cenotaph is the thing that the country will be looking at and hearing today, but around the country, I mean, there must be literally thousands of ceremonies going on.
That is true. This here in Whitehall clearly is the rather grand one, as you refer. But in truth, in communities around the country, at little cenotaphs or cenotaphs in small villages and towns, often run by Legion volunteers and, affiliated organisations. In truth, we are very grateful for the civic authorities, the police, in my view, that can allow and support these things, because they all, need organising and cause inconvenience perhaps to some. But the reality is, it is gratifying to see not only how this is represented each Sunday, Remembrance Sunday, but of course the 2-minute silence that was yesterday and was always on the 11th, and how well received that is around the country. Again, quite startling.
And finally, Bob, there are some who say that this is all a 20th century relic and we should forget about it and move on. But I have a sense, and maybe I'm wrong, but I have a sense that Remembrance Sunday, and indeed the 2-minute silence on the 11th, that somehow it feels to me that it's bigger than it was even 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, I would tend to agree with you, Nigel. I actually think that there is strong evidence that the 2-minute silence is recognised around the country as been that one unifying moment where people just remember those members of the armed forces and the security services that, keep us safe, and the suffering and the risk that goes with all of those things and the consequences of it. And yeah, I agree with you. I actually think people are more aware of that moment, that they just think about what other people do on their behalf in order we have the freedoms we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Bob, thank you very much indeed for joining us. That was Bob Gamble, OBE, Commemorative Events Lead for the Royal British Legion, and I'm wishing you well for everything today.
Thank you, Nigel.
Well, that was Bob Gamble, and interesting to find out where the British Legion came from. Even more fascinating for those that love history to see that actually Field Marshal Haig was a loved figure by many back in the 1920s and 30s. And I talked about this aged poppy seller. Well, yes, his name is Ron Jones. He lives in Newport, South Wales. He's lived there for 100 years, although he was away for a few years during the war. He signed up to the South Wales Borderers. He was captured, and he finished up in Auschwitz. He finished up in the labour camp in Auschwitz, and he's talked about what was happening at the extermination camp next door, the smell, etc. He came back to this country in a terrible physical condition after a 17-week death march. And what happened was, as the Russians were approaching, they marched the British POWs westward, and many didn't make it. So he's 100 years old. He's still selling poppies in his local Tesco's in Newport, and people now are travelling from all over the country to see him. But is he the oldest poppy seller? Well, I think he's incurred the ire of Wally Randall from Buckinghamshire, who is most upset at Ron Jones being described as the oldest poppy seller, because Wally Randall is 102, and he's been out this week selling poppies. Over the course of the next 45 minutes, are going to play you a series of interviews. They're from veterans that I met on Thursday. They go from the Second World War through the Falklands War and right through the recent conflicts. And I asked all of them what the act of remembrance meant to them. And I'm asking you that same question. I want to know what you think, what it means to you. You can call me on 0345 6060 973. You can text me on 84850. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch me, of course, live on Facebook and comment there too. And bear in mind that not everybody is of the same view, because Simon Jenkins, a distinguished columnist and author, today in The Observer says, no more Remembrance Days, let's consign the 20th century to history. It's not a view that I agree with, but perhaps you do. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 11:15. On the Thursday before Remembrance Sunday, a field of remembrance is opened in front of Westminster Abbey. I went down there this Thursday to interview people who'd served in our armed forces in a variety of conflicts. Here's one. Name, rank and serial number, please.
245-46455, Colour Sergeant Steve Orr, 1st Battalion Irish Guards.
Right, now tell me, what does Remembrance Day mean to you?
It means a lot to me, so it does. From coming from a military family and a military background, and having served for 25 years. My father was a former member of the armed forces, my grandfather, and his forefathers beforehand. It means a big lot to me for the commitment and the sacrifice that former soldiers made for this country and to give us what the lifestyle and the democracy that we have today.
Now, Tom, I'm looking at your group of medals, and it's pretty extensive. Do you want to talk us through where you served and what medals you've got?
This one's for Northern Ireland. This one's for Iraq, Afghanistan, Iraq Construction Medal, Queen's Jubilee Medal, Accumulated Campaign Service Medal for Northern Ireland, and believe it or not, a Long Service and Good Conduct Medal.
You got good conduct as well.
They're as rare as VCs in the Irish Guards.
I like that. So 25 years you served in the forces. You've been involved in Iraq, Afghanistan, and you're in good physical shape. Do you feel that the government has frankly done enough, particularly for those that have been badly wounded in those conflicts?
No, far from it. They need to be doing a lot more to support those poor men and women, you know, that sacrificed a lot of commitment. A lot of families went out there, you know, the wives back home, the young children back home, husbands coming home maimed. There's nothing, and you hear about it all the time in the news, and unfortunately the media are capitalising on it and exposing the weaknesses of the government.
And the Royal British Legion, because this is their time of the year when they try and bring the service that all you guys have given to the country to the fore in order to raise money to help veterans and to help veterans' families. Tell us how you feel about the Royal British Legion.
Royal British Legion, I'm a big fan of the Royal British Legion, so I am. Their advertisement campaign, I think they could do a little bit more to promote it more within the younger generation of the United Kingdom. I feel that the younger generation of today aren't supportive and aren't as supportive as what, you know, we really should be, and I think that boils down to, you know, advertising more than anything. And again, it boils down to a lot of finances and stuff like that. Where's the money coming from? And it's boiling down to, you know, the public digging deep in their pockets.
Give a message. Give a message to young people today about why what is happening this Sunday is so relevant.
This Sunday is a very significant, you know, part of the year, and it's there. You're there to support and represent former soldiers that give their lives to give you the freedom and the democracy that you have today.
Well, picking up on Steve's point, Dave says to me by text, I'm pleased they're now teaching World War I and World War II history, because I don't think they used to. Great show. Thank you, Dave. My view is this. I actually think there are more young people aware of this and interested in this than there were 20 years ago. And I made that point to Bob Gamble at the British Legion earlier. My first visit to Tyne Cot, which is the biggest British military cemetery in the world. It is just beneath the Passchendaele Ridge. I'm wearing the Passchendaele poppy today. That cemetery, when I first went there in 1986, there was a parking space at the front for half a dozen cars, and invariably there was plenty of room to park. The last time I went there, it was in February, albeit it was half-term. There must have been 20 coaches in the new coach park. So now, hundreds of thousands of British children go on school trips. They go to Ypres, the Somme, wherever up Normandy, some of them too, wherever else they go. So I actually think there is a greater awareness of this, and I genuinely think respect of this, because I know, talking to school teachers that take those trips, they all say that the children come back with a very different perspective on these things. Now, against that, you've got Simon Jenkins, as I said, Pete in the Observer today, no more Remembrance Days, let's consign the 20th century to history. Well, Simon, we listened, did we not, to an Afghanistan veteran not half an hour ago who was wounded seriously in 2009. So this is very much going on into the 21st century as well. I've also seen some polling saying that a significant number of young people, whilst they may be aware of what these events are, don't respect them. I guess there have always been two points of view, but I'm asking you, what does the act of remembrance mean to you? Remembrance Sunday means the freedom our parents and grandparents fought for over 2 world wars, is what I get by text. Anne from Nuneaton is a caller on this subject. Anne, hello.
Hello. Hello, Nigel. Good morning.
Good morning. So what does this day mean to you, Anne?
Well, it's my birthday.
Is it? What, the 12th of November, yeah?
No, it's the 11th.
Oh, right, so the 11th is your birthday. Right, well, that's a very special day then for you, isn't it?
So it's always been a special time of reflection for me, because I realised, and I got very interested in our troops and the sacrifices they make for us. And it's always been a special day. I feel kind of like honoured to be born on that
Okay.
day.
Because, and isn't it true that the silence now that is observed by so many people on November the 11th and not just Remembrance Sunday, that silence, as I understand it, Anne, before World War II, the country would stop on the 11th at 11 o'clock. And then during the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we sort of confined that to Remembrance Sunday. It's just in the last few years where the 11th itself has become super special again, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a very special day to me, obviously. I feel privileged to have been born on that day, a day when we remember those who have sacrificed. I feel kind of like privileged to be... I mean, I'm sure there must be thousands of people who were born on the 11th, but that's what it means
But to you, it's a very special day, and I thank you very... No, I thank you very much indeed for that. Karen says, no Remembrance Day. That's an insult to everyone that has died. Well, I knew that Simon Jenkins' article would provoke strong opinions, but I'm keen to hear from people also who think Jenkins is right. And I remember, at school, late 70s, early 80s, people suggesting actually the time had come to forget about it all, to put it in the past. But I think actually there are more of us turning out at these ceremonies now than when I was young. Giles is calling from West Drayton. What does it mean to you, Giles?
Well, a significant amount. My mother was born during the beginning of the First World War and lost both her godparents, godfathers, very, very quickly. Most of her uncles and a lot of her cousins. And so the very first day poppies were ever sold, she and her mother were selling them on Twickenham Bridge in 1921.
That was 21, was it, Giles?
Yes, they didn't sell them immediately after the war. 1921 was when they first started selling them.
Yes.
They were actually made... They were silk poppies the very first year.
Yep.
And my mother was left on her own, aged 6 3/4, and her mother went off to get some crepe paper because they were selling out like hotcakes. And they raised an enormous amount of money that first year.
Yep.
Significantly more than they ever expected.
And did she go on, Giles, selling poppies through her life?
She's still selling them this week.
What?
She's still alive and still
hang on. I'm trying to do the arithmetic here, Giles. So how old is your mum?
She's going to be 103 on the 1st of January.
103. So she's out there at 102 selling poppies, and she's been out there since 90.
Not every single year. There's a few gaps, but still selling them.
Giles, have you been in touch with the Royal British Legion about this?
She's in the book. They did a 90th anniversary celebration book.
Right.
Towards the back of that book, she gets 2 pages.
Wow.
And it's photographed when she was a little bit older than when she was actually selling poppies, because we didn't have a photograph of when she was selling poppies.
But she must be, Giles. She must be the only person alive who was selling poppies, poppies on the first official... Because I know that after 1918 there were some sort of unofficial poppies that people made. But you said 1921 is when it formally starts. She must be the only person alive doing it. Goodness gracious me.
As far as we know, yes. The British Legion invited her to the Remembrance service quite a few years ago now.
Yes.
And she was invited to 10 Downing Street as a thank you on the 90th year.
Wow.
Which is, 7 years ago now, I think.
That is
but they haven't capitalised. They haven't capitalised on her very much.
Well, I find it bizarre.
Because she's not an official poppy seller signed up to the British Legion. She's just
Well, I tell you what, Giles.
Collect a tray. And,
I tell you what, Giles. We'll make sure because I've played some interviews already. I've got more to come, but we'll make sure, Giles, next year that LBC does a proper, long, in-depth interview with her to find out exactly what the mood in Britain was like back in 1921 when poppies were being sold, and when memories must have been very, very, very raw indeed. Giles, amazing phone call. Please give our absolute best to Rosemary. Well, wasn't that a truly incredible story? You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 11:30, and my next interviewee was a Falkland Islands veteran. Could I please have your name, rank and serial number?
Right, Nigel, my name is Robert Lawrence. I was a lieutenant in the Scots Guards, leaving as a captain. I was injured in the Falkland Islands conflict, where I led the final attack on Mount Tumbledown. My serial number is 508365. My guardsman's number was 2446915. I recall very well standing in chambers full of tear gas, taking my respirator off and quoting that number.
Well, clearly that left a very big impression. And tell me, what does Remembrance Day mean to you?
Well, for all of us, it's about the history and the remembrance of the people that went before us. My regiment was formed on the 14th of March 1642. We have a lot of history. I personally fought in 1982 and was injured badly with a 7.62 round to the head, which I was very lucky to live through. So remembrance to me is about literally regathering as a band of brothers and recalling all those that cannot be with us, all those who, like myself, have lived with injuries and pay a great deal of debt. It's our time to be together as a band of brothers, whereas in fact most of the work that needs to be done these days is for the families, because it's the families that pay for what we as young men are happy to go and do. We return, and we return obviously with experiences and issues to a country that's not these days aware of it. We're very much in the background, and this is a day where we can put on our medals and be seen. In the early days, we wore uniform when we walked out. In the early days, men joined the national service, and everyone had brothers and fathers and uncles in the military. Now we don't. Since the days of the Northern Ireland bombings by the Provisional IRA, we don't walk out in uniform anymore. We're not seen. We're a large proportion of this country's population. We put a lot into it. We're very happy to do so. It's our choice. But this is one of the few occasions when we can stand proud, hold our heads high, and say hello to each other.
And the Royal British Legion, I mean, clearly every year they launch a very big campaign to try and make the whole general public understand what the implications of war are. And I think your point, that it isn't just the veterans themselves and people like yourself who are badly injured, it is about the families who are left to pick up the pieces. How do you feel about the Royal British Legion and their campaign?
Well, the Royal British Legion is a brilliant organisation that's gone on for a very long time, and that's where its strength is. It's very difficult. The charitable organisations are, of course, like everything else these days, completely controlled by bureaucracy. And when they are set up, they have to lay down the laws of who they're going to help. So Help for Heroes, which has done a fantastic job in raising the profile and maybe even encouraging politicians to help assist us and back us because it might win them votes. In fact, they cannot help anyone prior to 9/11. These are issues, these are problems that we have more troops, ex-servicemen in prison, ex-servicemen on the streets, ex-servicemen committing suicide. These charities, if they can stand proud and help, then it's of enormous benefit.
Yes, and there are other charities too, of course, that do try and help with this work. But let me ask you bluntly, do you think that the British government has done enough? Because we've been fighting in Afghanistan, Iraq, there are lots of people who've been very badly wounded, men that have been killed. Is the government, frankly, in your opinion, doing enough for those that have been through war?
The government has never done enough, and ironically, when you walk past the Royal Hospital, you see what generations, hundreds of years ago, managed to do, and now we are so determined to be fair to everyone that they do not do enough. The care for past servicemen is absolutely diabolical. The medical treatment is excellent. The people who work for these ex-servicemen and veterans do their damnedest, but the government failed to take their responsibility of ongoing care in hand properly. The fact is, if you ran a business and you bought a piece of machinery, you would price its purchase, price its maintenance, and price its disposal. You cannot just go to war and then leave these men 1 minute in Afghanistan, the next minute in Waitrose, and not give them the priorities that they deserve.
Now tell me, on your chest you've got some medals. Can you tell us what you've got?
My junior medal is a Falklands medal with a rosette because I fought with the Scots Guards. My centre medal is from when I served in West Belfast and the Falls Road, and I won a military cross on the action on Mount Tambledown. My biggest pride is from the fact that in my platoon there were also 2 military medals and a mentioned dispatches.
There aren't many people around today wearing military crosses, so it's quite a sight to see you here with it. And following the Falklands War, there was a little bit of sort of Hollywood-type drama about your story. Tell us about that.
I basically returned determined to talk about what we did and what we had done and what we faced on our return. After the Second World War, after the First World War, even after Korea, enormous numbers of people had their families involved. Everybody knew what was going on. We have this great idea that no one ever spoke about what happened. It's just rubbish. They spoke to each other constantly. I, returning as a soldier from the Falklands in '82, met many people who'd served in the Second World War. It ended 15 years before I was born in 1960, but they spoke to me about it. The reason they don't speak to people about it in general is because people cannot understand what they've gone through. So I came back determined to talk about it, and even more determined to point out the lack of care, the lack of continuity, the lack of assistance. We had what we believed was a military covenant. In fact, we didn't have a military covenant. We do not have any rights as returning soldiers. Who do you go to? You go to the military of defence. They say our job is to run a standing army, to protect our country. You go to the National Health Service. They say our job is to keep our country well. Who do you go to as a returning soldier? Where is the Minister for Veterans?
Yeah, well, I'm afraid we're very behind many other Commonwealth countries in this. And tell us about the dramatisation of your action in the Falklands.
Well, Colin Firth portrayed me in a movie made by the BBC called Tumbledown in 1988. It caused an enormous amount of furore, mainly because of the complete paranoia, it would seem, held by our leaders then. Our leaders now don't even have the strength to have paranoia, to be honest. But in those days, they were paranoid enough to try and control, which was stupid. I mean, the bottom line is the journalists in the Falklands were held back and told not to cross a line and keep back and keep quiet. The Americans soon discovered if you put them embedded with the troops, they came back blown away by what they saw these young men and women doing.
And where will you spend this Sunday?
I will spend this Sunday probably around here. I won't attempt to march on Whitehall at the Cenotaph because of my injury, and the crowds are just too much for that. So hopefully I will see you at the Westminster Arms for another pint night.
There's almost no doubt about it. Robert, thank you very much.
Not at all.
Well, tremendous sense of pride there in what he'd done. Miraculously lucky to have lived. But clearly a feeling, and I get this from nearly all of these veterans, a feeling that perhaps somehow we're just as a country not quite doing enough to look after those modern warriors who are coming back so seriously wounded. So what does Remembrance Day mean to you? Ron in Hounslow, good morning.
Hi, Nigel. Well, as I said to your researcher, back in the 1960s, early 60s, when I was a young lad, I actually used to help my grandfather make poppies. He was wounded in the Somme battle, lost a leg.
Yeah.
He used to make them, and I used to put them on the cards and put them in the boxes.
So where was this? Was this somewhere in Richmond, was it, or...?
No, this was... he lived in Hamworth at the time.
Yeah.
And he used to make them at home, box them, and then send them to the factory.
Oh, really? I didn't really... I thought people actually... I'd no idea, Ron, that people sat at home and actually did this.
Well, he did, so I assume other people did as well.
Right, so you sat there, boxed them up, you helped, and they were sent off to the factory. Wow, that's a very strong personal memory, Ron.
And that's why Remembrance Sunday means a great deal to me.
And how did he manage? How did he get on with his life after the war without
he was very independent. He actually served as a fire watcher in the Second World War.
Yep.
His sons were all away fighting. My uncle served in the Western Desert, then up Italy to Monte Cassino, then went from there to reinforce the D-Day landings. Then after that, he went to Korea, and he ended up as an RSM. He signed on in 1936.
Wow. So, big military tradition in your family, Ron, so this is a very important day to you, yeah?
Yeah, my grandfather's grandfather actually died in the Crimean War.
Right, there's a long history of it. Yeah, no, it's it's a big day. Ron, thank you for that. Never knew that. I always assumed people went into the factory at Richmond or wherever it was and made poppies. Very interesting. Bieber is calling me from Welling. Bieber, hello.
Hello, Nigel. Been wanting to speak to you for a long time.
Hi.
You're my hero. I observed a 2-minute silence and I sobbed my heart out. Because my father was in the Royal Navy for 30 years. He served on HMS Hood, and the Kimberley was blown up, was in the water for 3 days, 3 nights. He was almost chopped to pieces by propeller. He's seen his friends chopped to pieces. They fell between 2 ships. He started off as a stoker and then made his way up to a chief petty officer. He ran away to join the Navy when he was 14, lied about his age. I worked for the MOD for 7 years, and I saw some young guys that they all came back from 2 tours of Iraq, absolutely broken. I've got friends that have served in Afghanistan who are still suffering. I have the utmost awesome respect for everyone, past and present, who have fought and given everything.
So it's an important day for you, Bieber, in the calendar, yeah?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Completely.
Thank you. Thank you. And said with great passion. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. It's 11:46. It's Remembrance Sunday, and I'm asking what this day means to you. Robert, London taxi driver, texts in. He says, had a passenger in my taxi who asked me to pull over during the 2 minutes of silence so he could stand outside to attention. So I joined him. How proud did I feel? By Twitter, Nigel, my brother-in-law, fought in the Falklands with 4-5 Commando. He later committed suicide. My grandfather survived the Somme. Remembrance Day means so much. And that is one, I think, Phil, thank you for that. That is perhaps one of the most distressing things to a lot of people. We always talk about the dead, and we look at those amazing, huge First World War memorials to the missing, and the way the Commonwealth War Graves people keep the cemeteries in the most amazing condition around the world. But it is actually the fact that millions and millions of people this century have been very, very seriously wounded. And sometimes you can see it, because they've lost an eye or a leg. But more often than not, you can't see it. Because, we didn't really understand shell shock, I think, in First World War. We now do understand PTSD. Whether we're dealing with it as well as we ought to, I don't know. But when you get a message like that somebody who'd served with 4-5 Commando in the Falklands later committed suicide, it is desperately, desperately sad. Shirley is calling me from Windsor. Shirley, what does this day mean to you?
It was the day that my dad and mum got married.
Right.
In a queue with about 50 other people in front of them, because that offices were open that day, so they had to stand in a queue with about 50 people in front of them for a couple of hours, because you didn't have to make an appointment then.
What year was that, Shirley?
1940, I think it was.
Yeah, wasn't 1940 a record year for marriages, that people just got married in 39 too? But
well, because they were all worried about if one of them was going to come back and the other one wasn't.
Yeah.
And then I was born on the 1st of October 1940. That was the day that the Germans bombed London.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Well, of course, yes, that was when it began, wasn't it? So, well, you're still here, Shirley. So, a special time of the year to you for family reasons.
Yeah, happy days.
Happy days. Good. Shirley,
Happy days.
I thank you very much indeed for that. And lots of messages coming in. Nigel, don't often say this, but I'm proud we maintain remembrance. In World War II, my uncle lost his life in a tank during a desert campaign of 41-42. My late father was seriously hurt liberating the continent. And yet some want to give away our country, says John from Wales. John, I have tried to be studiously non-political during this hour. So far, I think I've done pretty well. Doreen is calling me from Cobham. Doreen, good morning.
Hello, Nigel. Lovely to speak to you.
Lovely to speak to you.
I've been making up my mind for the last hour whether to ring you or not, because I am a little bit nervous on coming on. I shouldn't be, really, because I do a bit of singing, so I shouldn't be that nervous.
I tell you what, if you asked me to stand up and sing, Doreen, I'd be very, very nervous indeed.
Well, I'm 88, and
wow.
I still go on karaoke.
Do you really?
Yes. In fact, on Friday, I went in my daughter-in-law encourages me, I went in 3 pubs and sung in 3 pubs on Friday.
Well done, you. Gosh.
I absolutely love it. I've sang, but what I rang up for, Nigel, was because I've been listening to your programme and I've been trying to pluck up courage, and I thought, no, I am going to.
Go on, then.
Because also what I would like you to do is to thank Blesma as well, because British Limited Sex Services Association they looked after my husband wonderfully well.
And he'd lost a limb, had he?
He lost both his hands at the age of 19.
Oh, dear.
We caught it before he got taken in the army in the war, Second World War, and then we lost touch with each other because obviously, being shipped about and that. I think he used to drive the officers and that about and that, because he was attached to he went in the Royal Norfolks at first, and then he was attached to the Airborne.
So he lost both hands,
he got blown up in Germany at the age of 19. He lost both hands.
Wow.
And then when he came back, after a little while, we met each other up, and I married him.
Yep.
And I cared for him for 62 years.
Do you know what, Doreen? He sounds like he was a very, very lucky man indeed.
Yes.
But you're quite right. There's the Royal British Legion, but let's mention Blesma. Let's mention all the other charities that do such great work.
That's
Doreen,
right. Yes.
Doreen, thank you so much. And the last veteran I interviewed on Thursday was a World War II veteran. Name, rank, serial number.
1475467 sharp.
Tell us your name, tell us your regiment.
Tom Schaefer, 30th Para Battalion, 6th Airborne.
Now, you fought in World War II, I believe.
Yeah. I missed Normandy. My first was a Battle of the Ardennes. We didn't fly over because the weather was so snow, fog, the lot. So we went over by ship. And I was reinforcements to the Battle of the Ardennes, where our battalion lost 61 bods in one village.
When you look back, I mean, because remember, a lot of the people listening to this will have been born in the 1990s, and some of them since the year 2000. Yeah. And I'm talking to you, and you were born back in the 1920s, and so for a younger audience listening to you, you are like a little piece, very active little piece of living history.
Yeah.
But when you've fought and seen men around you killed and injured, do you look back on all of that? Does this Sunday make you very thoughtful about the past?
It does. The thousands we lost in the First World War and the Second World War, we're still doing it now. In Europe, we're still doing it now. We are England. We're not bloody Europe. We're England. We're different. Pounds and pence and weights and measures. We're different. We are England.
Well, it's a bit difficult for me. I can't disagree with a single word of that. But we've met over the years a few times now.
Yes.
And whenever I meet you, you've got a very jolly demeanour.
Yeah.
You like a little glass of beer here and there.
I do. I like it.
Yeah. Is there any bit of you, when you look back at it all, and the sacrifice that was made by your generation in a huge way, was it all worth it?
Of course. Yeah, of course. And now we're in a battle now with Europe. We are England. We are England. Nothing else but England.
Well, I tell you what, I can't disagree with a single word of that.
Well, there you are. That was Parachute Regiment veteran Tom Schaefer, who was, and he wasn't actually at the Abbey. I did meet him at a public house round the corner. But what a larger-than-life character, and ending a very serious subject on perhaps a slightly happier note. He's in his 90s. He is happy. He's jolly. He realises that what he did in World War II came at a massive sacrifice and a price to those around him. But he believes it was worth it. Worth it because it meant we were a free country, a country of liberty, a country of free speech, which of course is why LBC exists as a radio station. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Coming up at 3 o'clock this afternoon, it's Alex Salmond. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel.